Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm Bob Clay. Welcome to Alaska Weather. Well, let's take a look at our watch and warning map here. Now, the banner's we didn't quite go far enough here, but we'll start with the areas and then I'll kind of explain the other ones as we get further along here. Okay, basically we've got for tonight and for tomorrow, we have these freezing rain advisories over most of southwest Alaska, extending all the way up to the northern Seward Peninsula and up towards Kotzebue. And then as you get further north, up along the Arctic coast and in the Beaufort Sea coast, we have blowing snow advisories, and those are in effect through tonight and tomorrow. And basically we have a pretty strong front, which is going to be whipping off to the east up there, and also expecting about 3 inches up along the north slope associated with that front. Now, let's take a look at the satellite imagery here. Just kind of set this in motion. And basically, we've got a lot of moisture kind of pushed north. And here's that front, which is starting to work its way off to the east there. And then we've got a lot of moisture you can see here. A lot of this is just mid and high cloud. So really not a lot of low clouds associated with that. And then as we get over southeast Alaska, generally fair skies for the most part. I mean, maybe a few high clouds, but that's about it. We'll set this in motion one more time and take a look at it here. You can see all that moisture is kind of streaming north, but the main low-level moisture is still south, and then with that associated with that front as it's sweeping across the north slope for tonight. Okay, let's take a look at what we have for today's weather. And generally, a low front, which is pretty much stalled out west, really not going much anywhere, with a high pressure ridge still holding over the Bering Sea. And then we see the first little surge, which we looked at yesterday, is moving over towards the Pribilof Islands, and with some rain and snow mix. And then this afternoon on our next radar near Bethel, we can start to see the moisture starting to work its way in, so I'm sure there'll be some freezing rain with it. And then we've got pretty much rain along the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern portion of the Aleutians. We've got that frontal system, which is over the Chukchi Sea, which is going to be working its way east tonight. We did have some freezing rain reported along the northwest coast there, and also some areas of blowing snow. And then as we got a little bit further south here, over south central or central interior, south central Alaska, Gulf of Alaska, pretty much high pressures continuing there. We've had some pretty areas of dense fog over the Cook Inlet area and the Anchorage Bowl today. And then along the southeast Alaska, generally a trough of low pressure there, mainly just a weakness between the high that's over the Gulf and the high over the Yukon. All right, now for tonight's weather. Generally, we're going to see that weakness of our trough will just continue over southeast Alaska. We'll see high pressure continue over the interior sections with areas of ice fog in the interior and patchy fog, or actually areas of dense fog still developing over Cook Inlet and the Anchorage Bowl tonight. Over the Gulf of Alaska, generally mostly cloudy conditions with some low clouds under that ridge of high pressure. And I probably should have gone a little bit further north. So let's zoom north, and we see that low pressure center, which is going to work its way across. That's going to be producing the blowing snow, again, up to 3 inches up along the Arctic and Beaufort Sea coast as it works its way through. And then we'll see some snow showers, and eventually when we look at the next map for tomorrow, we'll see that there'll be some clearing on the back side of that. Now, over towards southwest Alaska, generally we're going to be pushing that moisture in, as you saw on the satellite imagery, and we'll be looking for some freezing rain, widespread freezing rain, most over southwest Alaska, from Bristol Bay all the way up into the Kuskokwim and Yukon Delta, and also we'll be moving some moisture with some freezing rain potential into the lower Kuskokwim Valley tonight. And again, we're looking for accumulations less than a quarter-inch ice accumulation. And then south of that, you can see there's still a lot of warm air. Going to continue with some rain along the Alaska Peninsula, the Pribilof Islands, and the Aleutian chain, mainly the central and eastern Aleutians. Really not a whole lot going on in the central sections. And then we've got an O front which is stalled out to the west, producing some light rain over in those areas. All right, now as we move in towards Wednesday's forecast, generally you can see a lot of warm, moist air more or less continuing over the Aleutians, or Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians with rain in those areas, and also some pretty windy conditions, which we'll look at when we look at the Marines in a little bit. And then you can see the frontal system working its way north, spreading continued freezing rain potential in the Kuskokwim Valley, as well as the lower Yukon Valley, and all the way up to the Seward Peninsula up towards Kotzebue. And then you see that the other front is just kind of whipped off to the east there, and then we'll see some brief clearing behind it, maybe a few areas of blowing snow continuing with the strong westerly winds, and a few snow showers up on the Arctic and Beaufort Sea coast. And then as we get over towards southeast Alaska, generally we're going to have that weakness more or less continuing. However, we will start to see some winds kind of coming through the gap, so we'll see some locally gusty winds, particularly in the northern portion of the Panhandle for tomorrow. So again, looks like as that high kind of slides over the Yukon, we're going to be seeing winds getting pretty brisk over the next day or two. All right, now let's move it now to our Thursday map. And we can see here, look at the pressure gradient really starting to build. It's going to be pretty windy. We'll see winds probably at 60 miles per hour in some places through the gaps here in southeast as we get in towards Thursday. And now, further out west there, we can see now we've got clouds. As the high reach heats over to Canada, we'll see the clouds and the moisture starts to work its way off to the east here. We'll see basically that first front kind of pushes north, and we'll be looking at some freezing rain still potential up along the northwest coast, and all the way from a swath all the way down towards south central and over towards the western Prince William Sound. We'll have some potential for some freezing rain. We'll see rain with the warmer air further south, right around Kodiak Island. And then on the back side of this front, will still be cloudy over in southwest Alaska. But the good news is it's going to be warm enough. We should lose the freezing rain potential all over the Bristol Bay and the Kuskokwim Delta, Kuskokwim, Yukon, Kuskokwim also. And then on the back side, we'll see this trough kind of work this way in, and we'll see some rain showers associated with that. And then we've got yet another front starting to work its way north, and it's going to bring some renewed rains to the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutian Islands. And you see we'll start to see some breaks. I'll try to depict those on the map there coming across the Aleutians there. And then there's really far out to the west now, that front's going to start to work its way off to the east as the ridge kind of breaks down some out in the Bering Sea. So maybe some rain and snow showers associated with that along the western Aleutians. Okay, for this afternoon, the temperatures generally, well, you know, I probably should start over here. There we go. Well, generally 20s for right along the coastal areas, or I say up along near the mountains there. And then as you get out toward more closer to the coast, in the 37 over towards Sitka, some teens to 20s over south central Alaska, mainly along the coastal areas. You see some single digits inland, some minus numbers, minus 12 over down towards McCarthy this afternoon. And then as we get up a little bit towards the central interior sections, we had some minus or some single digits over towards the Fairbanks area, Yukon Valley, about a minus 11 or so. And you can see really pretty much along the Arctic coast, generally not too bad. A lot of cloud cover up that way, and also some winds moving in. So the temperatures should hold up pretty good, particularly or have been, with the temperatures generally in the 20s, you know, single digits on the Beaufort Sea coast. And then as you get along the Seward Peninsula, generally 20s for the most part. And now moving towards southwest Alaska, generally 20s, a few 30s along the coastal areas, but still pretty cold as you just get off the coast. And then along the Alaska Peninsula, 30s, 40s, and then 40s along the Aleutians, and some upper 30s to lower 40s in the Pribilof Islands. Now tonight's forecast, generally we're going to see those temperatures pretty much hold, really not a whole lot of change along the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. However, as you get up towards the inland areas of the Bristol Bay area, and also in the Kuskokwim Delta, you'll see temperatures still pretty cold. And again, we have cold air, shallow cold air near the surface, and then once you get 1,000 or so feet above that, the temperatures go above freezing. So you have that rain falling through that really shallow cold air near the surface, and that's what's going to give us the freezing rain for tonight. Anyway, well, we generally some minus 20s up over as you get up, and the minus 39. That's a little low. It's going to be probably more minus 25s or so for tonight up in the Yukon Flats there. And as you get up along the Arctic coast there, generally I would think of teens at the 20s as you get over towards the Fort Wayne right there. And now for tomorrow's high, generally teens for the most part, 20s along the Arctic coast there. And then generally we'll be looking for some minus teens to, I think this minus 27 is a little low. Probably maybe minus 20 would be the lowest up in the upper Yukon Valley. But in general, you can see it warms up down towards the coast into the 20s, 30s along the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians there. And over in southeast Alaska, generally 30s for the most part with some 20s along the inland areas. All right, now for tomorrow's flying weather, generally we're going to be looking for spotty IFR conditions with fog, particularly over in the Cook Inlet area and some blowing snow up along the Arctic coast. Widespread IFR with a lot of moisture kind of continuing over the Bering Sea, southwest Alaska, and that's going to be spreading north as we get towards the late afternoon hours tomorrow. Past conditions, Anitubic marginal VFR should be clearing by afternoon, same way with Adigan, Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR, rainy be VFR, windy VFR. Isabel VFR, we'll see VFR in Mentasta as well as Tanita. Portage may see a little IFR in the morning, but generally VFR by afternoon. Chilkoot and White Pass, both VFR. Basically, you can see here the freezing level or surface, freezing level at the surface here. You can see this white line, and you can see that elevated warm air aloft, which will give us a freezing rain potential over most of western Alaska. And as we move towards the icing conditions, generally icing, widespread moderate icing up to about 18,000 feet as you go further north up to 15, and then we'll be looking for some potential for some isolated severe clear icing in the below 5,000 feet associated with the freezing rain potential. And now at jet stream aloft there, we see the jet kind of swooping from the north, moving down towards the Vancouver Island there, and then on the other side of the high, southerly winds over in the eastern Bering Sea. Generally 45 knots, 40 knots along the Alaska Peninsula there out of the south, and then you see the return flow over southeast Alaska, 25 to 35 knots. And then as we move down to 3,000 feet, generally pretty much about the same. You can see the reflection of the large high pressure ridge. And then as we move over further off to the west there, you can see the return flow on the other side of the high, about 35 to 50 knots or so. And then now icing condition, or I should say turbulence, we just did icing. Turbulence conditions we'll be looking at for probably, I would say, some moderate turbulence up to or below 12,000 feet associated with the strong southeasterly flow coming across on the other side of the ridge. And then with the flow kind of coming out of the gaps as the pressure gradients build over the Yukon, I think we're going to see some moderate turbulence and light to moderate, I think, below about 3,000 feet. Well, that's all for this portion of the show. We'll see you next with the Marines.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Jim Peranto. Flooding can occur in Alaska any time of the year. Whether it's because of heavy rainfall or high volumes of snowmelt, flooding can pose a threat to life and property for Alaskans. But there's another cause of flooding during the springtime that's of great concern to people who live along Alaskan rivers. The cause of the flooding is breakup ice jams. Today I'll be talking with John Madden, who is the Director of the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management for Alaska, and he'll be telling us about their program called River Watch and how that program can help prepare communities during the river breakup season. Welcome back, John.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's our pleasure to have you back in. We want to talk about the River Watch program. I understand it's been around for quite some time, over 30 years, so tell us a little bit about the program.
The River Watch is what Alaskans do best. It's Alaskans helping Alaskans. It's a partnership formal between the National Weather Service and the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. There's a third party of the communities who do live along the rivers. We want to understand what's going on, see it happening, so that we can immediately convert the science and the observation into courses of action by the community. It's the best kind of partnership because you go straight from seeing something to doing something.
Well, that leads into my next question. Why is the partnership between the National Weather Service and your division so important to the Riverwatch program?
The National Weather Service has been one of the best supporters that we have amongst the federal family of agencies. It works with us because it can take observations, run it through very elaborate modeling, and make predictions of what's likely to happen. You match up that science along with my divisions, the state division, of how do we convert those predictions into actions. So we have science leading to emergency management and courses of action, leading to the community who must take the immediate actions.
Now, has technology made it easier to predict which rivers will flood?
Well, Alaska has 3,000 rivers, so technology won't help us look at all of them. But the technology like the satellite imagery, the computer modeling, the observations, the communications has increased the accuracy, but those are predictions. What we try to do with River Watch is to fly the rivers with humans. A Weather Service hydrologist or a meteorologist and a Homeland Security and Emergency Management operations specialist. What's happening right now? The technology has helped us focus in on which are the rivers that are likely to present problems to the communities.
So you have both observations on the ground and then you have the flyovers, and both of those combined are giving you more information on what the rivers are doing.
Yes, and in that flyover we also have that third member of our partnership, the community. The community understands the river far better than anyone who doesn't live there. The nuances, the curves, the turns, the tides, lower rivers, but also if a condition is leading to something, the local community can partner with the other people in the plain, decide that a course of action is necessary, and then communicate in that community's language directly by radio, saying this is what we see, execute the plan that we've made.
So you mentioned one thing that the community is involved with the Riverwatch program. What other ways can the communities help out in the Riverwatch program?
As with many emergencies or hazards that face Alaska, the role of the community is to prepare for that eventuality, be it earthquake or tsunami or river ice jams. Prepare. Know where your shelter is. Know where the power generation is. Where is the high ground? What's your pathway to high ground? Make sure that all of the members of the community are informed and educated and tested so that when that happens, these floods happen very fast, but when it happens, the community knows what they will do and they can pick the right course of action for that circumstance.
I was online today and I found a guide that I believe it's titled the 2008 Spring Flood Breakup Guide. And it has a whole bunch of information on how communities can prepare themselves. There was contact information. There was some stuff on how the Weather Service is involved with all this. I would imagine you would recommend people going to that guide and really looking at that if they really want to develop a plan for their community.
That guide is very important for the community and the families and individuals. It has guidance for all of them. But it all comes into things happen fast, and the time to think about what you're going to do is before the ice breaks up, before the floods come in. And so that preparedness is in that spring guide. It's the counterpart to what we publish in the fall for the coastal communities of the Fall Sea Storm Guide. We issue this out weeks and sometimes months before the season to give the communities that opportunity to go through their drill. Not every river floods every year. Therefore, not every community gets that practice every year. So it can be a few years in between these flood episodes. We don't want people to think that what it was last year means it's what it will be this year. That planning and preparedness and practice is very important for the community to be ready for whatever can come up.
And how is that going with the communities in Alaska? You getting a lot of feedback? Are people really taking this seriously? Numbers, I don't know how many communities are actually have a plan and a disaster plan if this occurs.
The river communities have been strong supporters of this. Every time we prepare for this, we include the communities in on the estimates of how this is going to come about, their observations of what's happening, their observations on how it is similar or dissimilar to previous years. All of that feeds back into the state and to the Weather Service to help us refine this. Every community listens very closely because these communities living right at the edge of the river, their airstrips are usually on the flat land next to the river. Some of their houses are right on the banks. They're very attuned to it, but they cannot make all those observations hundreds of miles upstream. We cooperate with the Canadians as the headwaters of the Yukon break up. That helps us look at the Fort Yukon, Beaver, that area. The Kuskokwim starts breaking up, and looking at what it's doing 100 miles away helps us prepare for 100 miles downstream. They can't do that by themselves, so through this partnership, we all benefit.
Great. There's more information I think people can go to on the internet. There's a couple websites. I believe that's linked from your main Homeland Security website. Correct me if I'm wrong here, John. There's one that's www.ready.alaska.gov.
That's our portal into the full range of hazards facing the state, one of which at this time of year is the river breakup.
Okay, and then the other one is www.flood.alaska.gov. Is that also part of?
It's a newly emerging one which will be a specialty for all of the hazards for floods, both the coastal and the river. So we'll have current information, we'll links to the Weather Service, other means by which you can report observations. It's a new approach for this year, but we think it's going to be very beneficial for the communities.
Outstanding. And there's another website too, the National Weather Service's River Forecast Center's web page, which is aprfc.arh.noaa.gov. That's another website you might want to bookmark. Thanks, John, for coming in today and talking to us about the River Watch program.
It's always a pleasure, Jim.
And thank you for joining us here on Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at the marine forecast. Start for Wednesday. And looking basically in inside waters, we have northerly winds 15 knots with gusts of 35. Then Canal and Glacier Bay northerly winds 30 knots with 7-foot seas. And as we get into the outside waters, look for northwesterly winds on the eastern Gulf there, about 20 knots with 6-foot seas. And then the southern outside waters, generally northwesterly winds, also 20 knots with 7-foot seas. Now for Thursday's forecast, we'll be looking for starting to see those outflow winds in the southern outside waters, northeasterly winds 25 knots with 7-foot seas, eastern Gulf easterly winds 15 knots with 5-foot seas. And you can see here Lincoln Island Glacier Bay now 40 knots out of the north with 8-foot seas, and inside waters there look for northeasterly winds 30 knots with gusts of 55 knots. So getting pretty brisk there. Now as we move a little bit further off to the west here, we'll start over towards Kodiak Island, southeasterly winds 20 knots with 10-foot seas. Chillicothe Strait will be northeasterly winds 20 knots with 6-foot seas. The Barren Islands generally southeasterly winds 20 knots with 7 feet on the outside waters, or southeast of the Barrens, and then west of the Barrens 5-foot seas. Southern Cook Inlet will be northerly winds 20 knots with I have 2-foot seas there, but that should be about 6-foot seas, and light and variable winds for the most part in the northern portion of the inlet. Northerly winds, light northerly winds 10 knots with 2-foot seas in Resurrection Bay. Variable winds 10 knots or so with 2-foot seas in Prince William Sound. Light and variable winds kind of over just south of the, or I should say basically Cape Clear to Gore Point, and then as you Cape Suckling to Cape Clear, look for westerly winds 15 knots with 5-foot seas. Now for Thursday's forecast, light and variable winds, basically for the Cape Suckling to Cape Clear, Prince William Sound, Northern Cook Inlet, only about 10 knots and about 2-foot seas, except for 4-foot seas over Cape Suckling to Cape Clear. And over at Cook Inlet, northeasterly winds 20 knots with 5-foot seas. Barren Islands, southeast of the Barrens, look for southerly winds 25 knots with 9-foot seas. West of the Barrens, southeasterly winds 25 knots with 7-foot seas. Chillicothe Strait, northeasterly winds 20 knots with 6-foot seas, and southeasterly winds 20 knots with 9-foot seas, waters near Kodiak Island. Now, basically south of the Alaska Peninsula, look for 30-knot southeasterly winds, seas 12 to 14 feet. As you get over in Bristol Bay, easterly winds 35 knots with 8-foot seas. And north of the Alaska Peninsula there, look for southeasterly winds 30 knots with 8-foot seas. On Thursday's forecast, southeasterly winds pretty much in all areas. Strongest winds will be basically north of the Alaska Peninsula, 30 knots with 8-foot seas. South Alaska Peninsula, 20 to 25 knots with seas 9 to 11 feet. And in the Bristol Bay Area, southeasterly winds 25 knots with 6-foot seas. Now for the Aleutians, generally for the eastern end of the Aleutians, look for 20 to 25 knot winds out of the southeast. South of the Aleutians, our eastern Aleutians, look for 11 to 13-foot seas and 7 to 8-foot seas just north there. As you get towards the central sections, basically west and northwest winds at 20 to 25 knots, 11-foot seas south of the central Aleutians, and then about 7 to 8-foot seas to the north. And then over the far western section, westerly winds 25 knots with 8-foot seas. And now as we move in towards Thursday's forecast, far west, look for southwesterly winds 30 knots with 15-foot seas. Westerly winds in the central sections about 25 knots with 8 to 10-foot seas. And as we move towards the eastern sections, look for 20 to 30 knots with seas anywhere from 8 to 12 feet, the highest being south of the Aleutians there on the Pacific side. And as we get over towards the eastern Bering Sea, Pribilof Islands will be southeasterly winds 25 knots, gale force winds 35 knots south of Nunavak Island, and 30 to 35 knots to the north all the way out. As we get up towards St. Matthew Island waters and St. Lawrence, look for seas highest about 14 feet over St. Matthew and 11 feet as we get over towards St. Lawrence. And then on Thursday's forecast, southeasterly winds pretty much in those areas, southwesterly winds towards the Pribilof about 8 feet or so. Moving further north now, Wales to Cape Thompson, look for easterly winds 30 knots. We'll see on the Arctic coast, look for southwesterly winds 25 knots and westerly winds 25 knots on the Beaufort Sea coast. Pretty much easterly winds 15 to 20 knots along the Beaufort Sea and Arctic Sea coast, and easterly winds 30 knots as you get over towards Wales to Cape Thompson. Quick wrap up, some freezing rain moving in with some warm air and some precipitation. Over to southwest Alaska, we've got that front kind of sweeping its way off to the west there, or to the east. And then we've got another batch of moisture, and then freezing rain potential moves further north, sweeping with that warm front. Fair skies over south east Alaska, and then as we get in towards Thursday, we'll see that freezing rain potential moving even further north. Gusty winds kind of starting to come out of the gaps over in southeast Alaska, and that's all the time we have for tonight. Good night.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.